Hi, my name is Jack Singley. I'm a park technician here at historic Yates Mill County Park. And we're here to enjoy energy and what energy looks like in a native, natural environment. So if you come to visit historic Yates Mill, we've got lots of trails. You can enjoy the forest and the pond, see a lot of wildlife. It's free to the public and we're available and open right now. So one of the projects I've got here to try to talk to kids about nature and energy and just to engage them about where the food comes from is this Three Sisters garden. A Three Sisters garden was created by a people called the Haudenosaunee. They still live in North America. There's 6 nations of the Haudenosaunee: Mohawk Nation, Oneida Nation, and 4 others across the country. They created a way of sustaining themselves over time, year-round, with 3 staple plants. A staple is something that's a main part of your diet, and we'll talk about that a little later. The 3 sisters that they were blessed with based on a legend that they have of Mother Nature giving them the 3 sisters. Sister 1 is corn, Sister 2 is post beans, Sister 3 is squash. Each of these work together in unison to survive, and they do so in a very special way based on the way that the Native Americans planted them together. If you look at the pile, when I built this, the pile is built up from a square. It's a 3-foot by 3-foot square, and I piled the dirt on top in a big pile. Right after first frost, I planted corn first. You don't want it, frost will kill plants, so you're careful on the pile. The next thing that was added was post beans 2 weeks later. The post beans use the corn to go up, to get closer to the sun, and to stay from getting too moist. The third sister is squash, and squash has some really neat adaptations. You guys probably remember, but adaptations are things that make one thing special over another. Their adaptation is broad, big leaves and then spikes to protect themselves from predators. So the squash are planted around the pile to protect the 2 other plants and their fruit. When things are planted in a pile above the soil heats up faster than the area around it. So transfer of energy from the sun heats up the pile faster. That is radiant heat. That radiant heat heats up the soil and the seeds in the pile faster, so they grow faster. If you go to a modern farm across the street at NC State, they've got fields and fields, and they're plowed into piles, just like this, just a little different shaped, but for the same reason. When you plant together, you do lots of things more than plant and leave. As a gardener, you're stewarding the soil and the plants. As a ranger here at Yates Mill, I steward the plants, the people who visit here, and also the project garden. So the Native Americans worked this for their main food source, and this is what the food looks like. Right here is a silk. You guys see this? When you've bought or eaten corn before, you may have seen silks at the top of the husk. You open the husk of the plant, and there are the seeds that are the fruit of corn. Each individual silk is attached to a single kernel of corn. Corn is the most varied plant that we have access to in modern times. And when people work in GMOs or geneticists, they work corn because of the variability of the plant. This up here, you guys see the pollen? I don't know if you can see the pollen, but it's really cool. This is the pollen of corn. And when you plant corn, you must plant it in a grid pattern like I did, close together, so that the pollen of one corn can pollinate the silks of another plant, because it's so tall. they're wind directed. So it's a type of grass. All grass are pollinated this way as well. The second plant, sister post beans, there's two kinds of post beans that you could buy from the store. There's bush beans, which are usually found in the south, and then post beans, which are these that climb. The Native Americans use post bean because they work together in the system well. So this is the bean, and before the bean is produced, it has 3 leaves and then a flower. And the flower is pollinated by insects. Biologists would say this flower is a irregular flower, which means it doesn't look like a sunflower, but it's a flower nonetheless, and little bugs get in there and they pollinate the flowers for us, creating these beans. Now, beans can grow throughout the season. Post beans will continue to make flowers throughout the season, and we can pick them on through the year. The last one is squash. So squash will produce this yellow flower typically. It'll be pollinated and then the fruit will come out. The corn is the longest producing thing. It takes the longest amount of time. But this is where the silk is coming, and the corn husk will produce right here. Oh, that pollen's going everywhere. That's cool. So, some cool things about Three Sisters. Scientists have studied why this works as well as it does, because it's very curious. We don't plant like this in Western culture. Western culture says you plant monoculture. You plant one thing because it's simple to take care of that way. But if you're working a garden as if it's a part of your family, you can do this and it's safer as a whole. So all 3 of those plants are working together. Just kind of like your mom, dad, sister, brother, they're a family. So they each have a purpose. What's funny is scientists have studied the soil and the fruit of these plants when planted this way. And their fruit have more nutrients in it than they would if they were planted separately. That's amazing science. So there's protein found in things other than the beans, in the squash and the corn. There's more nitrogen, so there's more nutrients in the other 2 in beans and squash. So it's an amazing thing. Let me show you a couple of things. So this food, I work in the county, so this is a public place. This food is going to go to the needy families of Wake County and the 6 surrounding counties. This is a small garden, but just imagine for a moment if some of you guys planted things in your backyard. How many radishes or how many leaves of lettuce could we give to families that need it? The Interfaith Food Shelter is right across the street from historic Yates County Park, and I met them this week, and they gave me this fun hat. And we are going to take the food here and any food that you guys want to make at your house and donate 5 different kinds of foods. So we're going to stick with 5 different things, and I'll be talking to the folks to talk about that later. And but as a group, maybe we can feed a couple of families that need food in our counties. That'd be great. Maybe some of the people that are watching this right now need food. Interfaith Food Network is there for you. They provide food to our community from people who have it, that want to give it. And there are a lot of people that love to give things here in Wake County. We're going to talk a little bit about energy transfer because you guys are in energy camp. So these plants grow not because of the shade, but because of the sun. And the sun is where all energy comes from on Earth. It heats our plants, it heats us. Different plants and animals respond to that heat in different ways. That's the beauty of things that are here. So this is what corn looks like when it's ready to go and it's ready to be harvested. Each kernel, sometimes there's 400 kernels in a shuck of corn. Each one of those is attached to a silk that's individually pollinated. So if not all the pollen hits all the silks, then some of these kernels will not be there, which is amazing. So it's very, very specialized plant. We eat bread at home, and bread is usually made from wheat. It's winter wheat in the winter and summer wheat in the summer, and all of it turns into bread all over America. Wheat takes a lot of space and it's slow growing, but the little nut on the wheat is called the wheat berry. When we make flour by crushing it, that wheat berry turns into a powder and we can make bread from it. We can do the same thing with special kinds of corn. There's three types of corn, main types of corn. It's dent corn, which has a little divot in it. It's really hard. Most people see that in harvest time with pumpkins and things. You couldn't eat it. Sweet corn, which we eat right now in summertime. It's so good and sweet. It tastes good. We can grill it. It's wonderful. That's for eating. And then there's popcorn. And that's a completely different kind of corn that is good for exploding into a popcorn. So in this grid, I have 3 different types of corn, varietals. Varietals mean that it's a special kind of corn. So this row is my control. So just like in science experiments you guys do in the classroom, you always have a control. My extra set, the one on the far end over here, this is my historical row. Yates Mill was created in its heyday. This mill was created in the late 1700s. Its heyday of the mill was in the 1820s, 1860s, that time period. So I tried to find heirloom varieties of these plants that would work well in my park. And I didn't use any kinds of natural or modern day kinds of farming equipment or fertilizer on the 4th row. One cool thing you can't see that I did in this garden is these piles. You can use a shovel, push it in, pick it up, and you can put frozen fish under there. When I was in high school or in middle school and elementary school, as you guys will be or are, we learned that the Pilgrims put fish under their plants because the Native Americans taught them that. And it's true, they did. And so I did that over there too. I don't know the science behind it, but you guys should look that up and tell me about it. Ranger Jack wants to know. So, but it's working in different ways. So you can tell from here that the middle row is really tall compared to the other kinds. Why is that? It's a good question. If you look at it, I'm not in the best place for gardening, right on the side of a trail. We're surrounded by big trees. What's the one thing that plants need to survive? It's the sun, right? That's where the energy comes from. So I think that this row gets more sun than the other rows. So the energy from the sun hits the green leaves. Green leaves are green because of chlorophyll. It's an enzyme or part of the cell of a plant that brings in sunlight and then transfers it into energy for creating roots, its structure, and eventually its fruit. All these plants are interdependent on one another, but also there are things that are eating the plants that I don't have any control over. So, how do I stop that? Modern folks would put pesticides and things on their garden. I'm not going to do that because I don't want it to affect my food. And it's an extra step, and it's expensive. So I do things that I can do that are under my control. If you look back, there's some CDs back there on my posts. Those CDs spin and catch light and look pretty, and they scare birds and predators away. When it's really sunny, sun will hit that and it'll create little patterns on the ground, scaring away squirrels, which is great. Is it perfect? Is it 100%? No. Is it worth doing? Absolutely. So I've got another thing back there. I've taken cans and I dug a hole in the middle and I stuck a can in there, and then I put an alcohol solution on the bottom of it. So slugs and centipedes and things that will eat the leaves and keep things from producing and eat the root mass will trap into the hole. And that's a useful thing I can do. And no pesticides. So they're not 100% effective, but they are effective. So I tried it. And it's worked really well. So once a week or twice a week, I come out here and I tend the garden. And I do many things to do that. I amend the soil. What does amend the soil mean? Amending the soil is I add horse manure and different kinds of food sources on the ground for the root structure of the plant. And when the sun or the rain happens, the rain sends that to the roots, and then energy is transferred from that manure to the plant through the use of its rhizomes and xylem and all those different parts of the plant. So another thing that I did once I had leaves up from the squash, which were the last ones to grow, is I put hardwood mulch over everything. And that does two things. Just like the squash, that holds in moisture to the soil, but it also keeps weeds from growing. So it makes this garden even easier to deal with when I've got other work to do, like taking kids on walks about nature, or picking up trash, or helping somebody out of the parking lot that is not able-bodied, that kind of thing. So, guys, it was great talking to you about the garden. Let's go and look at the mill. Hey guys, this is historic Yates Mill. Historic Yates Mill was built in the late 1700s, and its heyday was the 1860s, 1840 to 1860s. Believe it or not, this was a long way from downtown Raleigh, or Raleigh at that time. As many as right down Lake Wheeler Road. We are 4 miles from downtown center. But many people in the area brought their corn and their flour to be produced into grain, grist, here at the mill. So the mill works based on water power to move these big querns, these big rocks together that are thousands and thousands of pounds. This is called an overshot wheel. So the water is released into this forebay, which is the big rectangle here, and then the water flows over the wheel. Now the wheel is not pushed by the water. The wheel has buckets on it, and it fills with water, and the water, using gravity, turns the wheel. There's lots of different kinds of mills over the centuries. The Romans have one of the very first ones for turning with horses and mules for changing wheat into flour. But this was the best system for it. So when the wheel is turned, you can see the axle, and the axle goes into the building. But this building actually has two different foundations. There's one foundation that holds up the building itself, and then the other foundation holds the wheel and all the gear works. And that's because the gear works make a lot of vibrations. And if it was the same foundation, then the building would just shake apart. But it doesn't. So it's a very fortified building attached to a dam. Now in 1996, we had a Hurricane Fran that came through. When we're talking about forces and energy, that's an incredible amount of unrelenting force that comes through North Carolina, creating tornadoes and things. But the force of the water tore the old mill down and tore off this back half of the mill. In '96, they rebuilt it with help from the historic YMA, Historic Yates Mill Association. and brought it to a modern mill. So the modern dam here is actually, it is reinforced concrete under there, and then they used a facade of rock on the outside, kind of like war paint. And so it looks like an old mill, and it's beautiful like an old mill, but this is a modern dam. So it's rated to deal with storms of those natures that we get here in Raleigh. When you look at the building, there's a couple of things that you can't see because we're not inside, but I'm going to describe to you as best I can. This side of the building, when Ferris Yates built the mill, along with some other partners, this was going to be, and was for a time, a sawmill. So they used the diversion of the mill using the wheel and straps that attach to the wheel in places to run a circular sawmill that would cut wood into big, big pieces like the mill's made out of. That ended over a certain period of time because there were other mills in the county that did that. When this mill was created, this was not the only mill in Wake County. In fact, there were over 50 mills in Wake County, and people would travel to their closest mill and get things milled. Travel was very difficult in that time. We still had cougars downtown in Raleigh, in Wake County. We had wolves in Wake County. There were dangers of sickness as of today. But this was the social hub for the farming community. So when we talked about corn earlier, and we talked about the interdependency of those plants together, the mill for humans was an interdependency area. This is where you would go to play in the mill pond with your friends. This would be the place that you go and meet sweethearts. This is the place you would go to trade and to make food for the winter, and to sell your harvest. So this mill still works, and after COVID, it will still be a place that you can go and learn about mills and donate to YMA by doing a $5 tour. Until then, you can enjoy this place and relax here with your family. So I encourage you to come and see it and enjoy Wake County parks.